This is hearing number 23 of the 189th regular session of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights on the right to nationality and risks of statelessness in Uruguayan legislation, requested by Somos Todos organization, Somos Todos Uruguay. Welcome, civil society and representatives and the distinguished representatives of the state of Uruguay. And greetings to Commissioner Andrea Pochak, Commissioner Gloria de Mes, and the rapporteur for ESCR rights, and George de Lima of the Executive Secretariat. Before we begin the hearing, I'd like to remind everyone that the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights is celebrating its 65th anniversary of work committed to the defense and promotion of human rights, thanks to the common interests and consensus of states, societies, and societies to give life to the American Convention on Human Rights and the Democratic Charter. Since 1959, hundreds of professionals have come through this institution. Thousands of individuals, groups, and peoples have sought or resorted to the Commission seeking protection, justice, and reparation. We are marking 65 years of history with more than 100 country visits with the attendant reports, more than 1,000 precautionary measures granted, more than 750 merits reports, 220 friendly settlement agreements approved, and 377 cases referred to the Inter-American Court. All of this, of course, with a victim-centered approach of our efforts and giving this the highest priority, the victims, that is, to make sure that this hearing is inclusive. We request that all participants to begin their presentations by saying your name, your position, and the organization or institution that you represent. The three things, please. Subsequently, we request that each time or every time you take the floor, say your name again so that people with any visual disability are able to identify who is speaking. Likewise, we remind you that these hearings have closed captioning via Zoom available, and you can directly activate them on your equipment, on your hardware, as well as adjust the size of the print. And this also applies to those who are following us on the social media, the channels of the ICHR. Before I give civil society the floor, I remind you the time we're allotting. 20 minutes for your presentation, 20 minutes for the state, and then we, the Commission, will ask questions and make comments, the Inter-American Commission, for another 20 minutes, and then 12 minutes for each party to make final comments, and then we will wrap up. We now give civil society, the representative of civil society, 20 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you and good morning to all. My name is Andrew Scott Mansfield. I'm an international human rights lawyer, and I've been serving as counsel in this matter to Somos Todos Uruguayos, but I'm also a member of Somos Todos Uruguayos, having become a legal citizen in December of Uruguay. Thank you to the Commission for having us and the opportunity for the parties to work together today. This is crucial on this topic of nationality. It's not simply an issue of passports, it's an issue of identity and meaning that's been brought forth by the Commission so recently in Resolution 223. I know that we are here to work together to come to solutions, to come up with a path forward. It's been a long 7 years that this problem has simmered in Uruguay. It's been a long 5 years that we've actually been working on this passport issue because of the new biometric and electronic formats. But the problem goes far back, and it's much deeper. So why are we here? Nationality, of course. The Uruguayan law and practice on nationality and its impact in people's lives. So what I would like to do today to get to the solutions is to have us talk clearly, to have us talk directly, to have us talk honestly. The very first thing we need to do is define our terms. In Uruguay, in our country, we so often have a vocabulary that needs a Rosetta Stone, is what I call it. We have a localized version of different words that are used in international law in very specific ways. Under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, I'm going into law and I will avoid that. There have been hundreds of pages filed already, I know, a website dedicated to this issue. And today we want to just outline the issues and then be prepared to answer questions, but more important, present the testimony. But under the Vienna Convention, to return to that, we have an obligation to align our interpretive methodology, our use of these words with the international community, and not be isolated, not be alone, and not be out of the historical current. So the legal record is well documented, as I said, and I would like to reserve, based on if the Commission's interested or if things come up with the panel, the specific topics that are in that. There's so many. We were very pleased because we had put together this initial request in November and December. I've been working on this issue now for, it feels like 3 years, almost nonstop, from the moment of discovering that my American citizen, legal citizen of Uruguay now, wife, is on all of our documents and records. My first introduction was she is German. The United States does not think she's German. She does not think she's German. The banks don't think she's German, and the German embassy certainly won't receive us. But because she was born to an American colonel in the military in Europe and lived there for all of 6 months, to my new nation, she is and forever will be German. So that was my introduction. But why are we really here? It's an honor for me to be able to represent so many people who have trusted us with this issue. We know that Uruguay is committed. It's a human rights leader. It's why I chose to immigrate to Uruguay. It's why I live in Uruguay. Our country is perhaps in the region and perhaps for many, many people the symbol. So today I hope that we have the chance to go over the deprivation. We think what we discovered was that in the 90s there was a tremendous denationalization because there was a very subtle change in the passport. Before that date, for decades, Uruguay issued passports. This is just evidence, a symbol. Consular manuals spoke of nationality. Our passports contained a nationality field. That nationality was filled in and presented to other countries as Uruguayan legal citizen. That practice went on for decades and decades, only to be changed without a debate, without a law, but solely by an administrative change under the cover of darkness at night, I like to say, that simply got issued by the Ministry of the Interior. And suddenly, all of the passports of legal citizens became foreigner. And foreigner chosen not by actual nationality, not checking with third-party states, but simply by the fact of place of birth. So to the international community, nationality is not place of birth. We have so many other issues to go over. The fact that children are not protected. We have a gap. Children cannot be citizens nor nationals in our country. And we also have, at this point, the travel restrictions that you're going to hear about. That is, again, not the core. Identity and nationality is the issue we're here to solve. The fact that we need to be clear, Uruguay today says there is no nationality, no naturalization, no process for an immigrant ever to be a national, to become a national. We need to clear away the undergrowth of legal citizenship, the vocabulary today. Legal citizenship has been declared directly and unequivocally not to be a status of nationality. And yet in our law, implementing 19,682 is our law number, implementing the Statelessness Convention, we say that nationality or statelessness is ended by the condition of legal citizenship. And we say at the very same moment in our DNIC manual and the Ministry of Interior in many decisions, legal citizenship is not, cannot, and has not been nationality. So I hope we can address more questions, but let me hand the floor to Alexis Ferran.
Buenas, voy a hablar en español. Bueno.
I will speak in Spanish. Thank you very much for receiving us. I'm Alexis Ferran. I'm also the same group. We're here in Washington on our visit here. We went to the IDB once when I was a young economist, and I asked the I asked an Uruguayan who was at the door, and who told it where the meeting was, and he said, Uruguay's together with the president. I'm no question I'm a Uruguayan, and one day what he said about my country, and legally he's a Spanish citizen with a citizen document. He's not a Uruguayan according to the news. It's based on the country of birth, and it doesn't say Uruguay. He's not. And so if you talk the 33, many people who are in Africa who tried to fight to be equals, and the interim president, Lucy, the first woman, and who is a suffragist, and we won 4 soccer world championships as well, and so we have a process of naturalization which is guaranteed in the Constitution based on democratic countries, same process, and we have several different duties but it doesn't give identity. And so I want to talk about the democratic rule. It's true that and some are for and others against, but I could say that we all recognize the decisive role of ratifying conventions that guarantee non-discrimination, and so based on citizenship to avoid differences in citizens. This is a civic modern concept of, and for us, nationality. This is an identity. This identity, all citizens, doesn't matter age, are Uruguayans and have the rights of Uruguayans and the right to be Uruguayans. And Frugoni, Beltran, and the 20th century came to the consensus on this as well. And more recently, the statelessness law mentioned by Andrew, where it's defined that there's no longer statelessness, and this is something that is wrong. It's not a conceptual issue. We're not all equal. The impacts are intersectional, and refugees, war refugees, a country in crisis, are impacted most. And so it has an impact on the invisible people because there's no protection of the state as there should be. We're a country that seeks to be supportive, but we don't have this fundamental protection with regard to families, children. These are very different rights depending on where you were born. And so we ratified conventions guaranteeing to not discriminate against minors, but we are not protecting them with this legislation. There are cases where, for example, there have been adolescents who've been removed because they're not citizens, and young people that can't represent the only country they know in international competitions because they're foreigners according to this law and according to these rules and this terminology, and we cannot. And this rejection means that they'll have problems when they're older as well. And so they're like second-class citizens. And so citizenship is a fundamental right, and there's a reason for that. And so we're trying to come up with solutions, and we want to work together to make our country better in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexis. At this point, we have a video, and as is explained in the video itself, it's a legal citizen, Arvind Asizid. He is born in Iran and an Uruguayan legal citizen. So if we could play that.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Arvind Asizid.
My name is Alvin. I was born in Iran, but I'm Uruguayan. I've been working since 2015 in Uruguay as part of the delegation that should have come to the meeting, but because my visa was applied for too late, I wasn't able to do what was necessary and to get away from work to be able to be present. And so it's a very difficult time for people born in Iran for quite a long time because the identity is passport and identity document issued by the state don't recognize me as a Uruguayan citizen within or outside of the country. So this has an economic effect on me, but morally and emotionally, because we are sort of like second-class citizens. Personally, I've been faced something that I didn't realize that I would, that laws provide for freedom of expression, freedoms, and to take in immigrants. And it's a country that was created by immigrants, but I tried to travel to Paraguay with my Uruguayan passport, and then in the airport Montevideo, they didn't let me travel because I was Iranian according to my passport. And finally, I was able to travel, but when I got to Paraguay, and I missed, and so they asked for me because I wasn't able to get on board, and then I discovered my document was invalid, and I felt as if I was some sort of a criminal and I had committed some sort of offense, and the agents weren't aware on the type of passport in Uruguay, and so where it says that I'm Iranian because I was born there, and I couldn't get into Paraguayan territory. I was left there, and with my passport in my hand as a Uruguayan, they wouldn't let me get into Paraguay, and they viewed me as an Iranian. And so I felt as if I was being interrogated. I was forced to sign a letter where I was inadmissible, saying that I'm inadmissible with my name and everything. But at the same time, it says that I'm Iranian and I don't have a valid document to travel in Paraguay. And I'd like to show you as evidence this document, this letter of inadmissibility. And this was issued by the Paraguayan authority, and it mentions my name, my nationality, and my passport number, and it says it doesn't have a visa because I'm of Iranian nationality. I was forced to go back to Uruguay that same afternoon. I tried to find out to see in other embassies whether my Uruguayan passport was valid, and I was confirmed that I cannot travel with my document, and this forced me. I didn't want to go to the Iranian embassy to see what was going on, and so I opened a bank account, and one of the banks that works under the Uruguayan laws with my Uruguayan ID card, and I was able to. But the fact, even though I opened the bank account, I wasn't able to open one because of the Iranian nationality, and I'm sort of an outcast in my own country. I'm asked for citizen legal. I'm not recognized as a Uruguayan, and this is just something that really disrupts your life. I'm not able to live tranquilly and as any normal system, and to contribute to the economy and to the brain trust of the country. And we are Uruguayans, and we have the same rights and obligations as anybody else to be able to. We have to go to war. We can vote and everything, but we're not able to travel as if we were a true citizen. To be recognized as a Uruguayan, to be able to open a bank account as a Uruguayan citizen. The state doesn't recognize us as a second-class citizen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all.
I would like to call on my fellow legal citizen, Golnor Saratbekova.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Julia.
Morning, my name is Minor Salvecolo. I'm a member of the civil society Somos Todos Uruguayos. But firstly, I'd like to thank you personally on behalf of our group, Somos Uruguayos. We represent 30,000 citizens and legal residents of Uruguay for this opportunity to be heard, to seek a joint solution or together to this issue that we're enduring now. I was born in Tajikistan in 1980 and 1992, after the fall of the Soviet war. Tajikistan had a civil war which lasted for 5 years. My family and I, as well as thousands of other people, we were compelled to leave our home country and with what we were wearing, and we sought refuge outside of our country. Very tough times, as you can imagine, in a conflict region where we cold and typhoid, cholera, hunger, and the healthcare system was non-existent. Nonetheless, over time, peace was established, and we were able to rebuild our lives, and we established a new home and make new friends. In 2000, as a student of linguistics in Khorop in Tajikistan, I met my former Uruguayan husband, who was part of the peace keeping group in UN Peace Group, and I was 19 when I left Tajikistan, and in May of this year, it's been 24 years since I began to live in Uruguay. I've lived my entire adult life in Uruguay, and I have become a professional there. I have 2 children. 20 years ago, I've been working there. I pay all my taxes. I'm a tax-paying citizen, etc. My question is, if I feel like I'm Uruguayan and I've contributed to the country, paid my taxes for so many years, why under the current law I can't be a Uruguay? You're confirmed and ratified, and Uruguay has ratified the Convention Against Statelessness. Why people why are we stateless as a result? Tajikistan doesn't allow dual nationality except with Russia. And in accepting Uruguayan citizenship, I lost my Tajikistan nationality. When I tried to renew in the Tajikistan consular office here in Washington, D.C. in 2007, I tried to renew my passport. They withheld my passport, the consulate, and I was no longer a national of the countries. I hadn't realized into 2018 how serious the situation was when I traveled with my Uruguayan passport, and I realized that I had become stateless. I belong to an ethnic minority, an indigenous one that's called Pamiri, which to date were persecuted by the Tajikistan's government, which has been in power since 2004. The same president as thousands of countries, 2004 or 1994, and there's been a civil war and horrifying scenes as a result of this government. And there's more information about the situation of families in Tajikistan. From my group, there's recommendation for the UN Human Rights Watch, among other agencies, about the situation of this group and outside of Tajikistan, of this ethnic group. In my particular case, every time I travel, I'm very fearful that I'm not going to be allowed to travel, or worse yet, that I can be withheld in a foreign country and deported to the country of my nationality, that, as indicated on my Uruguayan passport, which is Tajikistan, this imperils not only my freedom but also my security, my safety, and I would say my life as well. I would go as far as to say that. And so 30 or 40 minutes is needed to go through customs to try to explain why does it say I'm a national of another country on my Uruguayan passport. I've had to take all this time when I've gone to Argentina. Uruguayans usually don't need a passport to get in Argentina, but they view it as a false or suspicious passport. It can't be a passport from a country that it says the nationality of another country. How can that be? It's from one country. My husband and my children have gone through migration and have to wait for me all that time, a long time for them to let me through. Ladies and gentlemen, 12 years it's been since I've ever gone to Tajikistan. I haven't been able to go see my mother or my siblings, my parents. Time is ticking for my parents. My children have not been able to meet their grandparents or their family, and the passport of my country, which is Uruguayan, does not ensure me protection to be able to do so. What guarantee can be given to my Uruguayan citizens that their mother won't be held or deported to Tajikistan and be convicted because your passport 18 years ago says that my Uruguayan passport of 18 years say I'm from Tajikistan. You don't know what it's like to live in this limbo and not be able to have the basic right to freedom of movement. And so therefore, we have come here to be heard and for you to understand our situation and to help us to offer a solution to this. I apologize for interrupting, but we only have limited time, and so we can continue with a time that you have later. The state now has 20 minutes.
Bien, Maite Dalmau Rodríguez.
Maite Rodriguez, I'm a lawyer in foreign affairs of Uruguay, and I am flanked by members of the Uruguayan delegation who permanently represent my country at the OAS. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the Commission, distinguished representatives of the civil society group, we are all Uruguayans. Somos todos uruguayos is the name of the group. We are here with a very open frame of mind, and I can assure you we are absolutely devoted to upholding the principles of human rights and the right to protection being not the least of them. And so this space in which we are going to focus on, let us face it, I think we can all agree, very complex and sophisticated elements as to what constitutes human mobility and the freedom of humans to go from one country to another and to a third country. Uruguay certainly has faced challenges of its own in this regard, but let me also say, and hasten to say, also great satisfactions. Challenges and satisfactions. We believe in the promotion and protection of human rights, beginning with the elements of the Declaration of Human Rights and going back to 1948 and our own writs and statements to that effect. We have been coherent. We have been consistent in applying privileges to all rights and privileges to all citizens. And before the adoption of the declarations I've just mentioned, Uruguay, by the way, was one of the pioneers, one of the very first on the planet to adopt licenses of this sort and rights of this sort. Back in 1906 and in 1910, women were allowed in the administration, and women could ask for divorce. In 1914, with the law on workplace management, there were requests specifically focused on women who were at risk for operating machines. There was also the Council of the Child, which is antecedent of our present Ministry of the Child, and that sets forth the rights and privileges of minors till they become of age. In the question of human rights, we have always focused on those most vulnerable. That has been the philosophy. Uruguay, then, it is fair to say, as the plaintiffs have said, greatly built on immigrants and the processes of modernization, industrialization of the country that started in the 19th century and very much marched forward in the 20th are rooted in all those who have come from different points of the planet and the very strong migration flows that until this very day as I speak are considerable. Our national legislation reflects this. We have done everything we can to ensure that migrants are embraced and welcomed and offered the same rights as everybody else. We don't make a distinction between all kinds of slices of migrants and immigrants and this and that and the other, for instance, in education and the right to work. All of them, however they came, have the right to be taught and to be considered. Law 1950 of 2018 specifically established the inalienable rights of migrants and the right to family reunion, access to justice, and due process inter alia. All of this is based on the principle of tutelage for those rights, which of course goes to the rights of immigrants on exactly the same footing as nationals, with no distinction. In the Sarkovid case, we were able to set forth the fact that some migrants who came in needed to be protected, and it was decided that they would be so protected like everybody else. The fundamental rights and privileges, therefore, is well established in my country, and it goes way beyond lip service or a mere mention in passing of this, that, or the other writ. All of the migrants have that same access. Therefore, the need to perhaps adapt the legal framework to tweak and adapt this or that particular aspect to a specific case, such as the one we have before us today, is not rejected. It simply needs time and dialogue of the kind we are having this very minute. We believe greatly in talking things out and understand each other. And we believe and wish to say emphatically that we are open to considering this most seriously and upholding that basic principle that I have been mentioning, which is that everybody has the same rights. Now, the right to citizenship and legal citizenship is nothing new in Uruguay. The phrase is, and it's continually mentioned, somos todos Uruguayos. We are all Uruguayan. But there is a substantive element here that is being brought up. But to streamline the situation, let me say that in the juridical and constitutional parlance and position, there is, on the one hand, the traditional position that was developed by Quino Jimenez Derecho in his masterpiece, The National Constitution, back from the 40s. There are distinctions here. The speaker is reading a legal text a mile a minute, and the interpreter is doing her very best to have to sum up. Although we are facing here two different, cognizably different legal statuses, you are going the mile a minute, and you need to speak not only more slowly, but enunciating, if you will. Could you begin, or do you wish me to begin the quote? Here we go. If the status of national is pertinent to international law, the legal concept of citizenship is linked to our internal public law. These are two cognizably different juridical conditions, but there is a difference between a national and a citizen. The majority position is, the speaker adds, is still the one this person is saying. Foreigners who come to our country and obtain citizenship are a clear example of this difference. But the traditional position, which is a minority position, Alberto Pérez Pérez is a professor of law who sustains this, that says that legal citizens can no longer, immigrants can no longer be considered foreigners. They're either citizens or they're not. So both naturalized and natural-born citizens are either considered nationals, or those who are foreigners must be continually regarded as such. They're either naturalized or not. In other words, every national is a citizen, and every citizen is either naturalized or born in the country, even though the political rights of active citizenship may not be exercised in the same way by each group. Now, here we have a concrete example of the difficulties that are included in the Uruguayan states as compared to certain texts of international law. The debate arises precisely as a result of 19,182 of Law 2018, which in Article 15 says, when it speaks to ceasing to be considered stateless or the assumption of a third citizenship, could not go so far as to say that someone is naturalized Uruguayan if we follow the traditional position of the Constitution to date. Now, this law to which I'm referring was put forward in October of 2017 by the executive and espoused by the Ministry of the Interior to look at the questions of statelessness, going back to a treaty that was signed in 2024 and updated in 2001 and 2013, setting forth the need to adopt formally the understanding as to what statelessness implies. And these must be consonant with the position internationally. The High Commissioner of the UN, the public ministry, all of these need to have a commonality in terms of this apparent dichotomy between citizenship and nationality. That's what we're talking about here. Citizenship on the one hand, nationality on the other. Where do the twain meet? The objective here was and is, I would say, to do away with statelessness and to offer protection. The latter, in order to show that the state of Uruguay is perfectly open to enter any debate necessary in order for us to uphold international standards. Now, an international convention and its impact on the national law, of course, can be a challenge. And it may yet mean that at a particular time, the national legislation needs to be revised. That may be. We are looking at the effective scope of nationality. We're doing that both in the executive and in the legislative. We recognize that there are divergent opinions in academia. And that is also true in the different technical groups of the state itself, of the state and all of its units. Some legal citizens who are considered, as I say, Uruguayans, may find slight differences when they travel, which is the point just made here. Now, there were two bills that were put forward to tackle the question of statelessness, nationality, and freedom to travel, freedom to circulate. One had to do of the right to citizenship on the same footing, and the other had to do with the position of natural-born Uruguayans. The idea was to try to meet civil society in its concerns. When we look at the monitoring of the law in the House of Representatives, I must tell you that one case came from Human Rights and the other came from various different codes. The difficulty arises that precisely, it's a case we're looking at, precisely when they seek to travel, some people who are considered Uruguayan citizens may not be considered as such by the people in the government of the country they're trying to enter. So there is an advising committee, and we're working on this with WASI, or ICAO, which might well lead to modifying the documents as they presently stand. This is not yet decided. It's being considered. It's being looked at. I can only say here, reiterate indeed, that we are open to look at any kind of openings or potential solutions as may be mooted here or as others may put forward. This is in any event an issue that not only goes to very basic principles of law, but the very sense of the nation's identity. Now, we may not all have the same opinion and may receive the same opinions. This is going to have to entail ongoing debate amongst all sectors that feel concerned. And I'm very pleased to tell you in that regard that over these last few weeks, as a matter of fact, the ministers of the Interior and Foreign Affairs were directly in touch with others in order to try to reach, in the short or medium term, some meeting of the minds in order to resolve these differences. They're moving forward. They're talking to other elements of state in order that this can continue, because it ain't over yet. I'm going to stop there. But again, I want to tell you the totality of the state, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I say, but the state in general and all units thereof are pleased to work with the civil service or civil society organization. We are all Uruguayans that are mentioned here, and anyone else who is interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We give the floor now to the head table, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. We begin with Andrea Pochak, who's also the rapporteur for migrants. Thank you very much, Chair. It's a pleasure to greet you all. I am the rapporteur on mobility, and I'm also the Uruguay country rapporteur as well. And I hail the tone at this hearing, at this working meeting, so to speak. It's in an attempt to try to work out the issues that both parties are bringing our attention to. Nobody's disputing the facts. The scope of these laws and trying to work out the difference in the resolution 223 about nationality and arbitrary deprivation of nationality and statelessness. In this resolution, the duty of states to ensure nationality and optional nationality or for foreigners was laid out, and particularly for stateless people, which is usually the law as prescribed by law, and that it must fulfill the standards. However, what we've heard that the so-called legal citizens in Uruguay are not successful at gaining access to the nationality, and this has, as a consequence, different issues when they travel outside of Uruguay, and other issues within the country, and the problem of statelessness for many of these people. Indeed, Uruguay is a country that has been characterized by championing international recognition of human rights and the proportion of specific standards in terms of human mobility, such as it is advisory opinion on the rights of children. It's been a trailblazer. Uruguay has been a trailblazer on this topic. And so therefore the question I have is, how can we at the Inter-American Commission to sort of break this logjam, this domestic logjam, to ensure that Uruguay ensures full voice of the right to nationality and avoid statelessness, which is for these people who are considered legal citizens. Let's not leave this matter in the hands of constitutional lawyers. The constitutional theorists and the dogmatic constitutional jurists clash often with international human rights law. The interpretation of the international it's theoretical what they think, and they don't. International human rights law doesn't admit or recognize this constitutional theory. So we have to provide we're willing to provide technical assistance to the authorities. The first thing, as soon as possible, with regard to the passport. Passports have to be brought in line with the international standards. It has a landmark case from 1983 before this Commission, and the Commission ratified in that report in 1983 the importance that passports have as documents for individuals. The administrative reforms in the field of nationality when it comes to passports is urgent, and the Inter-American Commission, we will help if you request it. And with this amending or reform, we have to clarify what's worthwhile to be clarified, how to bring Uruguay in line with international human rights standards. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much, Commissioner Potek. Commissioner Gloria de Mes has the floor, who's also the rapporteur for older adults and Afro-descendants, has the floor.
Very much, and good morning. Thank you for your interventions, both interventions. And I want to underscore the expressions by my colleague, because what I've noticed that there is this room to resolve, but that takes time, but the time is crucial. And the time is crucial for those now who are being faced with restrictions. But as I heard in the presentations, there's also a question, a big question mark. What happens to the children? And I think as much as you have been this pioneer in the hemisphere when it comes to human rights, it almost seems like a paradox that in being such a trailblazer, there are now again pockets created of those whose rights are in a way violated. So as my colleague indicated, where the Commission could assist, we are willing to assist. I think this dialogue and the sentiments expressed of wanting to come to a resolve, I think that is very positive, and we should use that to really make that change and have that impact, not only for those now, but also for those children that are Uruguayans, that want to be Uruguayans, and to want to represent Uruguay as well. I think that you owe yourself that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So now let's give the floor to Javier Palumno, who's the rapporteur for economic, social, and cultural and environmental law rights, who's a Uruguayan national, by the way. Thank you very much, Chair, and I'd like to thank the requesting party for this thematic hearing to discuss this issue linked to the Uruguay's legislation, and also welcome distinguished representatives of the state of Uruguay for your presence and for engaging in this open dialogue with regard to this topic in the framework of this hearing. In my capacity as the Special Rapporteur for Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights, I'd like to pose a question to the requesting party. I believe you've been quite detailed in what you've said thus far with regard to the impact that this situation has had with regard to travel documents. And I'd also like to know whether this legal situation has any impact on economic, social, cultural rights of individuals that are facing this situation. And that's what I'd like to know. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rapporteur. Now I'd like to give the floor to Jose Lima of the Executive Secretariat, who's also in part of the monitoring unit, which has to do with human mobility, as specialist in the rapporteurship on children and adolescents. Thank you very much, Chair. George Lima is my name. I'm the coordinator of the Monitoring Section 3, which is the sector that deals with 3 thematic rapporteurships in support of the Commission: human mobility, persons deprived of liberty, and children and adolescents. I would like, firstly, to offer my congratulations to the association We Are All Uruguayans, Somos Todos Uruguayos, for requesting this hearing, and obviously the delegation representing the state for taking part, and for bringing before us, as Andrea Pochak stated so poignantly, this moment of engagement, openness to dialogue. Both parties recognize that there has arisen a situation that must be worked out, sorted out. And what we're talking about here is how to do it. In what way can we reach a permanent solution that is to the benefit of all the people that at this time are affected by it? In this regard, I would like to get back to what all commissioners have phrased that spoke before me, both of them. The support of the Commission and how the Commission can provide support to the state in this process of coming up with a permanent solution. I'd like to mention that this year, we included nationality and statelessness on the list of high priorities in our working matrix of the rapporteurship of the right of persons in human mobility. And this is an issue that we're going to monitor very closely based on the leadership of the rapporteur. In this regard, in the Executive Secretariat, we'd like to bring to bear the work of the Commission and our technical knowledge. We'd like to place it at the disposal of the state. And there's many different ways in which we can cooperate with you. I can give you some examples. For example, we can conduct a country visit. We can conduct promotional events to further the discussion, the representatives of the state, that there's a need to continue to engage in dialogue and to support initiatives that the state has now spearheaded. And even domestically or internally, you just mentioned the initiative of the Ministry of Foreign Relations and of Interior. There's several different ways in which we can provide support, should the state so request cooperation from the Commission. And at the Secretariat, we'd like to reiterate our availability, willingness to do so, and availability to do so. Thank you very much. And now I'm simply going to just briefly say I'd like to echo and concur with what the commissioners have just mentioned and the specialists and the rapporteur have said. But something else that we have been dealing with here at the Inter-American Commission in December, and I recommend you reading the Resolution 1/23 on the right to nationality, prohibition of arbitrary prohibition of nationality or deprivation of and statelessness. And at this hearing, what I've been hearing, I've been listening, and I bring this up, this principle, the general principles of equality and non-discrimination vis-a-vis, and that the states should apply non-discrimination because it is a non-derogable right to nationality and not to be deprived arbitrarily of nationality and to not contribute to statelessness. This is very clear to not distinguish between individuals. So I also was thinking about the constitutional interpretation. In the Inter-American system, we've made great headway with regard to the interpretation. Additionally, in addition to what the American Convention established, of which Uruguay is the party in the second article, to adopt domestic effects and to bring in line its law with international standards, inter-American standards. In this regard, not only to overhaul the law and change the law, but also interpretations in the constitutional judgments, as Commissioner Pochak mentioned, and what leapt to mind is the Inter-American Court's judgment, an important Uruguayan crisis, the Hellman case, with regard to compliance with a judgment. The Inter-American Court held that bringing the convention in line and enforcing the convention are complementary to each other. So it seems to me that Uruguay, I urge you to do so, and with the academic cooperation of the Commission, indeed, if you can bring in line both the judgments of your constitutional court and your laws, that would be the most desirable thing. Thank you very much. So now let's give the representatives of the state and the petitioners 12 minutes each to speak. Thank you.
Andrew Scott Mansfield with Somos Todos Uruguayos. I will lead off with that for those who are listening only or who are blind. I appreciate that. Let me try and address each of the questions, but first say again to the delegation, thank you for the state being here. And as I think each of us in our testimony today has indicated, we chose Uruguay. We came to the state because we wanted to be a part of this culture, this system, this established set of laws, this constitutional history. We have a glorious history, and the constitutional history is also an amazing debate. I came to the hearing today reminding myself and telling myself not to debate the Constitution. I am wont to, because it might sound like I'm joking, but I have President Bache's 1829 copy of the Constitution on my desk at home, which I was lucky to acquire last year, and I believe in our history. I believe in our constitutional traditions. But what I don't believe in is that one interpretation, if it happens to be anti-fundamental human rights, can somehow trump our international obligations. I think that's what each of us have been saying today. As Uruguayans, we want our state to fulfill all of these obligations with the help of the Commission. With our help, we will do whatever we can, whatever needs to be done to move this forward. It has been stalled for so long with the two bills. The two bills went nowhere. We were very hopeful. I remain hopeful, but I don't see there's going to be swift action. And like Guatemala, we cannot keep going back over and over for years like this while people live in this condition. To answer each of the questions, I am also concerned about the rights of our children. I know Alexis will speak more on this in just a moment, but we have this gap. This gap is a tremendous gap. Citizenship itself does not bring nationality. That's what we came here today to talk about. It has been hidden. It's been, again, obscured because we use the word citizenship. And to the rest of the world, as Resolution 223 says, those are roughly synonymous. In the United States, I think we would call what we call legal citizens in Uruguay the rights of citizenships, to vote, to participate, to hold office, to return to the state, and in our case, to have a passport. But it doesn't show that we're nationals. We are not members of the culture. We are not members of the identity of Uruguay at the moment. And we are reminded of it constantly. But our children bear the brunt because they have neither citizenship nor nationality. And if they could even acquire citizenship at 18, they would still not be nationals. It's a double gap. That's what I want to say. We talked about what are the economic, social, cultural impacts in the country. Uruguay, again, I cannot praise our country enough, but at the same time, to be identified, to be segregated, to be told as a child you can't represent the country on a team, even though you were born here, or you came here when you were 6 months old, you feel like you grew up here. You are Uruguayan in your heart, but you are not one of us. That is the message over and over again. When we fly back to Carrasco, we are forced into the foreigner line as adults, and our children, of course. This segregation produces a kind of social discohesion. It really is, it doesn't feel that way to our brothers and sisters in Uruguay who are fortunate enough to be natural citizens, but to be constantly classified, identified, segregated is in itself an injury. We carry it, our children carry it. There's no reason for it. And I'm pleased today we're making so much progress, and I know we are all in the same place on what we want for the country. But as we move forward, we must think together. My tutor at University of Montevideo is Dr. Ruben Correa Freitas, who I have the greatest respect for, and I know he and I disagree to the core on this issue, and there likely will never be a meeting of the minds on this. That is okay. That is okay. I know that a 1946 legal text has taken over our mental space in our country. It's volume 2, tomo 2 of La Constitucional Nacional, the original typewritten version from the class that Justino Jimenez de Arrechaga taught. I also have the typewritten manuscript with his proposed bill from 1946, how to segregate even further the legal citizenship. I honestly do not believe, and I will stop and cede the floor soon, that we can take the position as a nation. It is not justifiable. A non-derogable, fundamental human right, which is now identified in Resolution 223, all of the case law that we have been struggling to bring together, all of the case law that ACNUR helped us put together in terms of just pointing the way. The court has a rich tradition, but now Resolution 223 takes that rich tradition, all of the cases, the Dominican case especially, it puts it right in front of us, point by point, which is what I tried to do on the specialized website we deployed for this hearing, to take each of those relevant parts of Resolution 223 and compare them to the impacts on the ground of what happens when a state does not follow them. There's a conference next week, which I'll be participating in by Zoom, in which Commissioner Pochak will be explaining even more about Resolution 223. What I do not want for our state, for our country, for our people, is for Uruguay to be the example of the state that we do today. Let me say this in all respect. We create stateless people. Our legal citizens who show up at the door and obtain our citizenship and are stripped of their nationality, because other states see this as double nationality, become in-place stateless human beings in Uruguay with no chance of remedy. Because we've declared legal citizens can't apply for stateless protection, because obviously they aren't, but they aren't. We can't be the state that says our children just simply have no right to nationality and citizenship. We should be the example. We are the leaders, not the followers in this. And the pain that this causes when people tell us it's all in our heads, that we're making this up, that we're separate but equal, just enjoy your equality. The point is, no, we are not, we will not be, we cannot be equal unless we are nationals or effective nationality. I cast my anchor with somebody who should be dear to the Commission, Alberto Perez, wrote a very good article. We put in the materials that are submitted from 2009. His opinion, which I believe, is legal citizens are not foreigners. And I hope today we can all agree on that. We are not foreigners, and we're here to help. Let me pass the floor to Alexis.
Sí, yo quería hablar de un par de cosas de tipo de...
Well, I wanted to speak to a number of the differences. I lived in Uruguay when I was a child. And our system of Social Security does identify legal citizens, quote unquote, ciudadanos legal, as foreigners. There you go. Now, when you renew your passport, in law 180200, 19.6 does not allow legal citizens to call themselves Uruguayans or their children or grandchildren for that matter. Goes on and on. Now that wasn't true. We were all the same. We all had equal footing except aspiring to the presidency. That was it. That was the one distinction. But that was then and now is now. And believe me, it ain't the same thing. There is a very marked difference between the attention paid to citizens and their abilities and freedoms. There's a segregated file or place where foreigners can line up, and it isn't where the Uruguayan flag is. And when at school, children are singing the national anthem and they can't line up under the flag, what kind of sense does that make in the mind of a child, I ask you, and quite frankly, in the mind of any thinking adult? There's something that isn't matching out here. I hope you can see that. I'm pleased to address you again, Camille Dorsad. The issue here, as we are living it, okay, is that very often, quite frankly, we're looked at as statistics, numbers on a page. But we're not a statistic. We're human beings, thank you very much. We moved to Uruguay because we love Uruguay. We are Uruguayan to our very marrow and in our soul, but not on paper. And that is very tough for the children, leaving aside the adults, difficulties traveling. Even in Montevideo, the capital, at the airport, we can't use our passport in the electronic reader that would let you go by automatically because we're turfed out and we're told you're in the wrong line. We're looked on as foreigners. And the fact is, so-called legal citizens do not have the same rights, let me get down to practical examples, when they want to rent a house. If one of the requirements for the rental of that space is that it be citizens. So that goes to your right to have a home. And it translates into, no pun intended, the rights of your kids. It flows. How can one deny a child the right to be Uruguayan citizens when it so happens by a fluke they were born somewhere else, but practically since day one or day two, if you like, I'm offering this as an example, they have lived Uruguay, they love Uruguay, they think they're Uruguayan. This is the 21st century, dear friends. I could hope that we would make a distinction and understand what the commonality is and what we can aspire to. Thanks for giving us a chance to speak to you.
That we went over earlier. Thank you to the Commission, and we truly appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. El Estado, sí. Por favor.
The state has the floor. Chair, let me say first and foremost that I'm very moved by a meeting of this nature. Can't help but saying that. Because what's the bottom line here? The bottom line is, what is it to be Uruguayan? And what goes to the heart of those who seek to be Uruguayan, who yearn to be considered Uruguayan? That's why we're here. And I think it is perfectly fair to say, and certainly I say, I'm lining up. I think that's a beautiful objective. Great goal to strive towards. And I can assure you that the government is perfectly prepared to look into the various paths forward toward citizenship. It's a complex issue, all right? You've described it very well. And I'm not suggesting it's a slam dunk, but I am telling you that we are perfectly willing and determined to look into this in the coming days, weeks, perhaps months, trying to distinguish as between, let us call it for the sake of the argument, the procedural stuff, the blanks on your questionnaire, the passport, that sort of thing. And the other element, which I regret to say, but it is complex and it has to be recognized, like it or not, we in Uruguay consider ourselves a country that operates under the rule of law. And there is the absolute necessity to buttress steps by bills that will give the gravitas and the scope to any measure that is being proposed and root it, I say again, in the rule of law. That's who we are, that's how we operate, and it's perfectly feasible. What you have been looking at and have been analyzing very carefully show and speak eloquently to your grasp of the complexity and your desire to overcome it in a legal way, obviously. Now, you did mention in passing how difficult it can be to be segregated in some ways, yes, but it's also true that migrants, and there are many of them, as you know, in Uruguay, have benefits, have the right to work, enjoy Social Security. There's a long list of the human rights that are afforded to people coming here in general terms. But I'm not saying for an instant that what you have pointed out isn't true or isn't important. And we're here to put our heads together and find a way forward. I say it again. Now, when you make the point that moving from A to B, traveling internationally is a problem, well, that is an issue. Everything that you have said, let me tell you, is nothing new to any of us at this table. Been there, understand it. And so let me go back to square one. Where does that take us? We need to put our heads together and say, okay, what are we going to do about this? How can we couch this in a way that will lead to a solution? The concept of naturalization, by the way, for Uruguay, has not been something that was easy to assimilate. I'd like to say in the gerund that it's an ongoing process. It is not a done deal because the migrant, precisely, there's a flip side to something really good. The migrant was never looked at as a migrant. He was, hey, like you, like anybody else, he was welcomed, she was welcomed, and they weren't looked at as weird. Or, look at the entire society comes from migrants, let's be clear. But what happens is that legislation has marched forward at its own rate. And the texts that speak to nationalization are pretty detailed. And here is the potential conflict or contrast, let me put it this way, between values and juridical norms in which the legal citizen is looked at in one way and citizenship writ large is looked at differently. And how do we confess, how do we juggle all of this? And I'm the first to tell you, it ain't easy. It's an interesting challenge, and it's important also to recognize that 2024 modern interpretations may not be the ones that we're obtaining not so long ago, without, of course, shoehorning the Constitution into a space that it never was meant to occupy. Can't force things. There has to be a logic. There has to be a sense to this. Now, the government, I think I can say that very frankly, understands it very well. I do agree, alas, that this sort of thing has not been easily resolved. I'm not saying you flip a coin and it's done, but I am telling you that there is an open mind, there is an understanding that something needs to be done differently, and we're very happy to speak to civil society and must indeed speak to Parliament, because who can imagine that we're going to do our own thing and who cares about Parliament? That isn't going to happen. And by the way, let me tell you, all of you on the ICHR, don't think that when I'm saying, oh, we're going to have to speak to Parliament, don't think that's like throwing into a deep well, something into a deep end. The Parliament is very, very well aware that there are issues such as these that need to be crunched. But here's the deal, and I don't apologize for this. On the contrary, the Parliament is very picky about respecting, down to a hairline, what norms are established. We want to make very sure that the rule of law is respected and that the essence of the Constitution is respected as well. Now, that may mean that we have to think hard about how we're going to find a path forward. But guess what? I'm an optimist, and I want to say it in the plural. We are optimists. I think I can say this. You know, my heart on my sleeve. We're an optimistic people. 7 years, yeah, seems like forever. But you know, where there's a will, there's a way, as the saying goes. And if people are convinced that one is working on things that are worth discussing, then that's what we do. But let me also say, everybody here must recognize when everything is a priority. Oh, it's a priority, it's a priority. When everything is a priority, guess what? Nothing is a priority. That's the way life is. And so everything to do, I think we can look at the different spaces that you have to fill in, the blanks that you need to fill in for the passport. That's one way to go. Another way to go, and I think that's important, I think Andrea is right, we better look carefully, and there must be a constitutional set of a bibliography. But parliaments are sovereign in my country as in others, and laws at the end of the day, laws in vigor, or after all, the law of the land. What are you going to do? So the international context that Uruguay believes in and has subscribed to, that is a very central pillar too. Because we are proud of who we are, let me tell you. We are leaders in the Americas. I'm not sorry to say it. We don't have a checklist, do, this is wrong, that's other, and hey, I'm not sure about that. Uruguay stands tall, and we are proud of who we are and how we do it. I'm sorry if this sounds like demagogy. I promise you, I don't mean to, but it grieves us. It grieves us. We are grieved in our very soul and in our very marrow when there are issues that may lend themselves to a different take. Now, there are procedural issues on the one hand, and there are issues on the merits on the other. Let's not confuse things. And let's also take note of the fact that, you know what? Problems, like so many other things in life, change over time. It's like an apple or some other fruit. They get riper over time. And what suddenly was never looked like a right, well, what do you know? All of a sudden, that issue has become a right and must be respected. And so the polemics that we have dealt with on occasion in Uruguay are worth looked at, and I'm willing to have you sit with us as openly as possible. We will invite you to come and talk to us, and let me tell you, the government is open-minded and willing to talk. I can only echo the points made by the ambassador, which I fully share, and I want to invite civil society, because at the end of the day, it's wonderful that we're giving ourselves the opportunity here this morning to listen to each other, to cast a few more bridges that may be necessary, and I agree with the rapporteur, Resolution 2 of 1923, of 2003. It's a focal point, and also thanks in advance for the technical support of the Commission. We will put this under the authorities and ask them to take note, and we will be certainly resorting to your kind offer of help. Thank you. Well, let's agree then, says the ambassador, but let us work internationally. Don't bug us. Don't breathe down our neck. Give us a chance to get ourselves together. We very much respect our domestic laws, our basic internal laws, and move forward. So we're going to look at the timetable and we'll be in touch. Now, it's an electoral year in Uruguay, sorry to say, but hey, who cares? History cannot stand in the way, we're all agreed, when there's an important issue at hand. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very, very much for that open discourse and open mind, I might add. I think this is a complex issue and moment in the region and in the world, dare I say, because there appears to be a tendency to turn a blind eye and be virtually impermeable to anything that is diverse, anything that's different. What's that? What's that about? Anything that's different is looked at askance, is looked at with suspicion. And what my compatriot has said, I think, is, alas, an element that needs to be recognized. And in this very region, we're seeing that, and it could be that Uruguay, and I hope very much that Uruguay, if anybody can, Uruguay can, embrace diversity, because that's the challenge to all of us, the Commission, the states, the representatives. It's this way. Are we going to embrace diversity, or are we going to take a hegemonic and exclusive position in which we push out anything that sounds different, looks different, or acts different? Let's embrace diversity. Thank you very much. The meeting stands adjourned.